Hi friends and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. I'm your host Mark and today it's my Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. Hi friends and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. I'm your host Mark and today, well, first an apology if I'm looking a bit dishevelled and harried. It is damn hot in the UK here today. I don't know what the temperature is. It's probably busting the thermometers, I think. The worst thing is that all the upper floor of my house is built into the roof, so it gets much hotter up here than it does downstairs. But of course, if you're following the channel, you'll know there was a fire recently and I'm not really using the downstairs. In fact, this very room was chemically cleaned yesterday as smoke got into the upstairs on the night in question as well. And so if you're wondering if the walls don't look very clean, well, that's how they look after they're chemically cleaned, ironically enough, dirty. But there you are. So yeah, sorry if I'm looking a bit sort of harried. But today it's my mid-year book freakout tag. I had absolutely no idea what this was at all until I happened to see another couple of booktubers I followed were doing it, and it's a thing apparently that booktubers do, so I am a booktuber, I guess, so I'm going to be joining in and answering some specific questions about the mid-year position the channel finds itself in or something. Anyway, let's get cracking with the questions. I have them on a piece of paper here because this is, you know, totally unrehearsed. Well, not totally, but mostly. So let's have a look. Question number 1. How has your reading year gone? Well, if you're following the channel, you'll know I'm doing a Read What You Own challenge in a desperate attempt to get my TBR down to something vaguely reasonable. There were piles of books on the floor in my library, as the insurance company are calling it. It's a small extra bedroom at the top of the house that's got some bookshelves in it. So apparently, according to my insurance company, it's my library. Well, there were lots of piles of books on the floor as well as the bookshelves, and part of the reason for trying to get the TBR sorted out, well, the main reason really, was to try and help with the storage of things so that I didn't have these piles of books everywhere and keep tripping over them all the time. So that's what I've been doing. I've been doing my Read What You Own challenge. It's been fun. I've done 60 books, as you might be able to see by the counter behind me to the left up there, and it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. It's been good to get around to some titles that have just been sitting on those shelves for so long. The worst part, of course, has been that it comes with a book buying ban, and I've only bought one book this year because of that, and I've had to add that to the total of the books I'm going to read under the challenge, or add 5 to the total, which is now sitting at 105 books to be read, and I've got 60 of them done so far in the first half of the year, so I'm pretty happy with how my reading year's gone. Question number 2. What is the best book I have read so far this year? Well, that one would be this. The Boats of the Glen Carrig and Other Nautical Adventures by William Hope Hodgson. Now, this is part of an incredible series of 5 Nightshade published books. I've had this set for a long time. I spent more money on this set than any other books I've ever bought, and I ain't read them. And we are talking a few years. She'd been sitting on the shelves for 2 or 3 years, I think. I think it was perfectly acceptable when I didn't have the full set, but once I got the last, most difficult one, most expensive one, why I didn't get round to reading them, I have no idea, but I didn't. But anyway, this I have read this year, and this is my favourite book of the year so far, fiction-wise. As well as the main novel, The Boats of the Glen Carrig, there's also Sargasso Sea stories. There's half a dozen of those. There's The Exploits of Captain Galt, which are about a dozen short stories about that particular smuggling character, and then there's a couple of stories about Captain Jat and a couple of stories about DCO Kargunka, and those were efforts that Hodgson made to start other series which didn't quite pan out in the way that Captain Galt did. Now, this is a terrific volume. I can't really fault it aesthetically. It looks wonderful. I just love the way it looks, and I can't fault the content either. I really enjoyed it. The Boats of the Glen Carrig is an absolute cracker. Weird fiction is the absolute best, and that's the best fiction book I've read in the first 6 months of the year. The best non-fiction. So I'm going to have two here because fiction, non-fiction. This is non-fiction. This is Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir by Eddie Muller. I'm a huge film noir fan, can't get enough of it, seen hundreds of them, seen films that are categorised as film noir that obviously aren't, but I've watched them anyway. And this is just a wonderful book full of some lovely photographs as well as some great text from Muller, as he basically just goes through some main tropes and themes of film noir and relates them to specific films. But he writes it in a kind of hard-boiled, hard-bitten way that most PIs talk, in a sort of cliched film noir kind of way. I love it. It's just, it appeals to me so personally, this one. I just think it's a beautiful book as well. Can't get enough of it. Took far too long reading it because I was dwelling on it because I was enjoying it so much. So that's my favourite non-fiction book of the first half of the year. Next question, let's see. What was the best book you've reread so far in 2026? Well, that's this one. The Boats of the Glencarrick by William Hope Hodgson, because it is the best reread I've had this year, not just because it is the best novel I've read so far this year, because it's the only book I've actually reread. The rest of the material in this Hodgson volume I hadn't read before, but I had read The Boats of the Glencarrick before, so that is my favourite reread as well as my favourite novel of the year so far. Next up, what is the best manga you've read so far in 2026? I haven't ever read a manga, I'm afraid, and that's kind of weird because I am a massive anime fan. I know it's a sad cliche, white middle-aged guy who lives alone watches a lot of anime, but I do. I am a living cliche, I'm afraid. Yeah, I love anime. I really do. I've watched tons of it, and I've always got a series on the go, or at least I had until my television melted within the fire. But yeah, so I haven't at the moment. What was I watching anything? I think I was. Yeah, I got a couple of episodes into the time I got resurrected as a reincarnated, or is it resurrected? Oh, my brain. The time I got reincarnated as a slime, I think it's called. This is like the third season. I've watched, I think, a couple of those, so I'm not actually all that into that season yet, but I do love the show. I mean, I love the first couple of seasons of it, even if I couldn't remember the title exactly. But see, so yeah, but I've never read a manga. Just never have. Maybe I'll get round to it one day. Obviously I should, but no. So the answer to that question is just there isn't one. Okay, so next up, turning the page. What is the best sequel you've read so far in 2026? Well, no, if you're talking about an episode of a series, that would be this one. Jeffrey Deaver's The Burning Wire, the 9th volume in his Lincoln Rhymes series. Sequel seems to sort of almost imply it's just like the second book. Yeah, it does, doesn't it, kind of? If it's just the sequel. Well, I haven't actually read any second books of a series this year, so it's got to be this one. Yeah, this is great. Lincoln Rhyme, he's a detective. He's in this one, he's up against a guy who's taken control of the New York City electrical grid system and using electricity as a weapon. I love this. I love the premise. I love the series, and it's a usual twisty-turny thriller from the master Deba. Great stuff. So next up, what is a new release you haven't read yet but you want to? Well, that's easy because I'm on a book buying ban, obviously, so stuff has come out that I've earmarked to buy, and the one I really want to read is Intimate Audrey, the authorised biography of Hollywood icon and film star Audrey Hepburn. And the real reason I want to read that is it's by Sean William Ferrer, rather, who is son with Mel Ferrer, and Wendy Holden. And the reason I'm particularly keen is not just because I'm an Audrey fan, but because I've read Sean William Ferrer's previous book about his mother, which was incredibly moving. It wasn't a full biography like this one. It was more of a coffee table book with lots of photos, but there were lots of reminiscences in there, and I found it incredibly moving, and I really it really surprised me. I didn't expect to be affected by it so much. It was great. So I'm really looking forward to the entire thing, if you like, the full biography. So that's that one. what is your most anticipated book for the second half of the year? Well, that would be The Three Ravens Ghost Tales. Original ghost stories filled with the past, present and future of fear. That's by Eleanor Conlon and Martin Vaux. And the reason I'm particularly looking forward to that is I'm a huge fan of the Three Ravens podcast, which these two guys run. It's an examination of English folklore and storytelling. They brought out a book last year, which I read a couple of months ago, called The Three Ravens Folktales, and there it is. And this may appear in my top 10 of the year. It's certainly a possibility. Yeah, I really do love it. They basically what they do is they take old folk stories and myths from English history and reimagine them kind of with a more modern slant on, and actually take them as and render them as fictional stories, if you like. I think that's the closest description I can come offhand. And I love this book. This was really great. So I'm really looking forward to their ghost stories, their ghost tales rather, follow-up. So that's that one. What was the worst book you've read so far in 2026? Yeah, that one's not difficult. That was The Unholy City by Charles Griffith. That was allegedly a Lost World literature tale about two guys who end up in this, this strange city somewhere, which is, it's supposed to be a satire. It's supposed to be a comedy. It was written way back in the early 1900s, so perhaps it was just that a lot of the humour went over my head completely, but I just thought it was pretty awful. Real drag to get through despite being fairly short. I really hated that one. The only good thing I can say about it is it got covered in soot during the fire and got written off by the insurance company, so I don't have to actually even pass it on and inflict it on anyone else. So that was the worst one, yeah, definitely. What's my biggest disappointment of the year so far? Well, that would probably be, and I don't have a physical copy of this one. It didn't get affected by the fire, but I had got a digital copy. Was The Chinese Orange Mystery by Ellery Queen, and that disappointed me not because it was bad. It was fine. It was okay, but Ellery Queen is such an iconic figure in detective history. So influential. There's a mystery magazine, the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, is still going today. It's been going for, getting on for 100 years now. It's not that far off. And I just found the book very, very disappointing. It was a very interesting premise. A body is found with all these clothes turned the wrong way around and all the furniture in the room turned the wrong way around, so that it's all facing the walls. And I thought that was really unique and different. But the resolution to all that is kind of, very implausible, to be honest, and not very exciting. So, yeah, and I felt the book was also spinning its wheels a lot during the second act. It was contriving things to try and pad the runtime or the page time, the number of pages. Sorry, too many films. I've reviewed too many films in the past. Okay, but that was my biggest disappointment, not because it was particularly bad, but I just expected more. So next question. Time to get rid of that page. What is the biggest surprise of the year? Well, that was the Three Ravens Folktales book that I showed you, because I didn't know what to make of this. I didn't know what I was going to make of this, because these two guys are podcasters and they talk brilliantly and very amusingly about folktales, they read some of their work out on the podcast, and I did enjoy it, but I wasn't sure whether I was going to enjoy it in book form quite as much as I did, and it really, really surprised me how much I love this book. I was really blown away by it, not what I was expecting. I expected to enjoy it, but not nearly so much. So that was my biggest surprise of the year. My favourite new author, new to me or debut, it's one that's new to me, was this guy, Cornell Woolrich, who you might have seen featured with this very book in my last reading roundup, because this is The Bride Wore Black. This is the first book I've ever read by Cornell Woolrich, despite being incredibly familiar with his name from many, many film adaptations from classic Hollywood. most of which I thought were passable at best, even with big stars attached, which is why I'd never read him. I wasn't really impressed with the quality of the movies that was made from his work, but when I read the book, I was really surprised how good this is. It's got a fairly unique structure, I think, in the fact that it's split into parts, each part covering a different murder, and each part divided into 3 chapters. The killer's preparation for the murder, the actual deed, and then the detective coming along afterwards and trying to look at the evidence and connect it with the previous killings. And it's just, I hadn't come across that particular format before, and I think it works great. I really do. What I really love was the fact that all the characters, the victims in it, are all different. They're all killed in different ways. It's just a lot of variation in the book, which I really enjoyed. Normally, when you have something to do with what you would term a serial killer, although that obviously wasn't a term that Woolridge would have recognised. But what those are generally, they have the same MO, don't they? If they stab, they shoot, they strangle. They don't do things in different ways, but the killer here does, and I really did like that. I thought that was very unique, almost. And I also like the I also like the way that the flaws and weaknesses of the victims played into the way they get caught, the way they get caught by the killer. And I thought that was really clever too. So yeah, I'm really impressed with this. I'm going to be trying lots of his other work. And excuse me now while I pick up the list of questions that just fell on the floor. There we go. Professional YouTube, eh? I'm on the wrong side now. Okay. What book has made you cry so far this year? Well, I hate to sound like a real macho hard man, but no, none of them have. Nothing. Zippo. Zilch. Not one has really moved me in that way. I mean, I've enjoyed a lot of what I've read. I've laughed. I've been a little sad at times, but nothing's been anywhere near making me want to cry, I'm afraid. And that's not to say it never happens, because it does. But not this year. Not so far. So that's that one. What's the most beautiful book you've bought this year? Well, I guess this means physically rather than actually to do with its content. And physically, because I know obviously people are into buying those spray painted edges and these big special editions and things like that. Well, my most beautiful book of the year will be this one that I've bought this year, which is Death Deep Down by Dan J. Marlowe. Because you've got this really foxy bird on the front here in a bikini. Sorry to sound very 60s there. And it says, topside she was all honey and sex and woman. Underwater she had the conscience of a shark. I love that. And yeah, I mean, doesn't it look great? I mean, yeah, it's a little bit battered and stuff. But yeah, I think it's beautiful. And it is the only book I've bought this year because of the Read What You Want challenge. So it wins by default anyway. Okay, so next up, what are the books you need to read by the end of the year? Well, I did pick out a few here because one of the things I really do need to read is the next William Hope Hodgson volume in the Nightshade editions. This is The House on the Borderland and Other Mysterious Places. Now, I have read The House on the Borderland, the novel, already. I would say I think the first half of it is absolutely brilliant. I can't recommend that enough. Even the dogs outside are enjoying it. Unfortunately, the second half of House on the Borderland I found to be quite a drag, and I really don't enjoy that. I didn't the last time I read it anyway, and I was immensely disappointed after that spellbinding first half of it. But my taste may have changed a bit. It was a long time ago. There's some other material in here, of course, the Other Mysterious Places, which I'm not familiar with, but I do really want to read that. Next up, let's just avoid the claps of the table and all the books flying everywhere. Next up, we've got the first volume of I Am Providence by S.T. Joshi, which is the definitive biography of H.P. Lovecraft. I'm really interested to read this. I have read that it is a little too much in the sense that this is an absolute doorstep of a book and it's only volume 1. There's actually another volume sitting through there in the other room, my library. Yeah, so I have read that there's perhaps more detail than anyone would ever want. But I'll make my own mind up about that, thanks. And yeah, I'd just be interested to hear about his life and what, if we can get any insights into his creative process and where all these incredibly strange fiction came from. So I'm looking forward to that. Talking of which, this is all actually weird fiction. We've got The Supernatural and Weird Fiction of Algernon Blackwood, Volume 1. Really looking forward to this. The 4 Algernon Blackwood novellas I read in the British Library's Tales of the Weird book, Roarings from Further Out. The paper's gone on the floor again. Those 4 novellas blew me away, so I really want to read more of his stuff, and that's obviously the place to start, is Volume 1 in this series. But most of all, I want to read this, because this is super weird, because this is Between Two Worlds, The Weird Tales of Arthur Machen. Now, I've read 2 Arthur Machen stories. The White People, which was in a Tales of the Weird volume I've already reviewed on the channel, and a story called N, and that's just the letter N, and that's in another Tales of the Weird volume which I've just finished, which actually I've not reviewed on the channel yet. And I have to say, those 2 stories are 2 of the damn weirdest things I have ever read. I'm not sure where Machen was coming from, whether perhaps he indulged in a few substances or something, but they are just so strange, so well written though, and so powerful, but so weird. So I'm really looking forward to reading those. Can't wait, in fact. Actually really chomping at the bit to get into that one. Why haven't I put it in my TBR for this month then? Don't know. Bit of mistake that. Anyway, those are the questions. Oh, no, there are some more questions. Sorry, they're on the floor again. Okay. Oh, yes, there are. Okay. Oh, yeah, there are 4 of them, actually. What is your favourite video that you've made this year so far? Well, that would have to be the 2 videos I made about my vintage science fiction paperbacks. I really enjoyed talking about those. They brought back a lot of memories from a long, long time ago. And I hate nostalgia normally. I think it's a disease to look back all the time and go on and on about how great things were back in the day and all this rubbish, quite frankly, because they weren't great back in the day. Believe me, I lived through the 1970s. It was grim, really grim. And the 1980s was just a taste-free zone for a whole decade. It's, anyway, don't get me started. But yeah, talking about those sci-fi paperbacks was great, and it did make me want to read them again. It really did, got me kind of almost hooked into doing that. I haven't done it yet, and I'm not intending to during the Read What You Own challenge, obviously, because I'm trying to get rid of some of these unread books, not go back and do some rereads, but I might do a bit later, I think. Yeah, so I particularly enjoyed making those, and I think they were most successful videos, I think. I don't really look at the numbers often. Sorry, I probably should. Which video did you think would flop but did well? Well, I basically think all of them are going to flop, if I'm honest. And it depends on what you consider doing well. I mean, my videos don't get exactly hundreds of views. I'm happy. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. I'm happy. I'm not particularly bothered. It would be nice to get more views. I'm not going to pretend it wouldn't, but yeah, I enjoy the process of doing this. I enjoy the interactions I've got so far. I don't particularly think in terms of numbers all that much. This isn't a business for me. Any upcoming videos you're excited to make? Oh yes, definitely. The one where I finish the Read What You Own challenge and I can buy books again. That's the one I'm really looking forward to making. That'll probably be October, November time. Really looking forward to that. Any channel goals by the end of the year is the last question. 250 subscribers would be nice. I'd like that. That would be, seems like a nice round figure to aim for in the next 6 months. That'd be, I think, about another 90 or so subscribers. I know a lot of booktubers talk in the thousands and other types of YouTubers talk in the millions, but obviously that's not what we're talking about here. I'd just be happy with 250. That'd be great. The only other goal that I've got is to keep posting. to be still doing this in 6 months' time. As well as the fire that I've been dealing with and the aftermath of that, I do have another personal challenge coming up. I'm not going to talk about it now. I might make a video about it later. It's very personal. You'll know when I do, just from the title. But yeah, so my goal is to keep doing this, keep posting, and just keep enjoying the process. Because as I say, this isn't a business for me. I don't know what I'd do if I got monetized. It would become like a job then, wouldn't it? Sort of. I'm not really sure I'm that keen on that, to be honest. And I'm not sure I'm very keen on my videos to be broken up by adverts either. Because I find that very annoying when I'm watching YouTube. Anyway, enough of all that. So those are my mid-year book freakout tag thing. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for staying with me right the way until the end of this video. Have you read any of these books? Did you enjoy them? Have you got anything you'd like to recommend for me to read? Obviously I'm doing Read What You Own at the moment, but in the future, in the near future, I will be buying books again, so I'm happy to take recommendations and see if there's anything out there, particularly in the realms of weird fiction, that you think I might enjoy. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you again, and please, if you've enjoyed the video, think about subscribing and popping a quick like. That would be most appreciated by me and by the gods of YouTube. And please don't forget, keep looking through those strange narrow back streets of your town to find those weird dusty second-hand bookshops. Keep visiting those car boot sales, those market stalls, those charity shops, because there are treasures out there that only you can find. Be seeing you.